The smell arrived before the sight. A heavy, sickly sweet odor, impossible to mistake, the kind that never leaves your memory. When Eisenhower's jeep stopped in front of the gates of Ohrdruf, the general said nothing. He simply took a deep breath, clenched his fists, and moved forward. April 1945. The cold morning wind carried dust, smoke, and something else. Something American soldiers had already begun to recognize, even as they desperately wished they didn't know what it meant. General Dwight Eisenhower stepped down from the transport truck, his uniform splottered with dried mud from the road. He had insisted on coming personally. He did not delegate. He did not send representatives. He did not wait for reports. He needed to see it. He needed to feel it. He needed to bear witness. The concentration camp of Ohrdruf, the first liberated by American forces on German soil, stretched out before him like an open wound on the world. Barbed wire fences rattled softly, swaying in the wind as if trying to whisper stories no one should ever hear. An American sentry, pale and trembling, raised his hand in salute. "General, you should prepare yourself for this." Eisenhower did not respond. He simply walked forward, passing rows of burned barracks, partially charred bodies, corpses stacked like firewood beside a barn, and men, alive but only technically, who could barely lift their heads. Leaning on an improvised cane, a prisoner stepped forward a few paces. His ribs protruded like the slats of a broken crate. He tried to speak, but his voice emerged as a dusty whisper. Eisenhower approached, kneeling beside him, ignoring his aides who tried to stop him. The man raised his hands, thin as twigs, and touched the general's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but also a silent scream, a plea for this American leader to understand everything. Eisenhower understood. He inhaled deeply and rose slowly. His face, usually firm, now carried something else, a mixture of horror, disbelief, and a quiet fury that in another man might have exploded. In him, it hardened into determination. The general walked toward an open trench where dozens of bodies lay piled together. Men of all ages, some still had their eyes open, staring at nothing. The American soldiers who witnessed what Eisenhower did next would never forget it. He asked to step down to the edge of the trench. He moved close enough that his face was only inches from the dead. A major tried to stop him. "Sir, this is unnecessary. We can provide reports, documents, photographs." Eisenhower raised his hand, silencing him. "I want to see everything." This was more than curiosity, more than horror. It was method. He understood something no one else in that camp yet grasped. The world would doubt this. Humanity itself, already shaken by Nazism, by bombs, by destruction, would seek psychological relief. Fully accepting the truth about the camps would be almost unbearable. The general turned to his men. "I want newspapers, photographers, film crews, everything you can bring. History will try to deny this, and we will make sure it cannot." He knew it. He sensed it with absolute precision. Denial did not begin decades later. It was already there, latent in that very moment, breathing among the ruins of the Reich. He felt it as a weight in the air. As he walked on, two soldiers, hardened by years of combat, struggled to hide their tears. Eisenhower did not hide his, but he did not look away, not once. He entered the ruined barracks, the sheds filled with blood-stained clothing, the rooms where instruments of torture still stood in place. And then, suddenly, he stopped.
On a wooden table lay a stack of unsent letters written by prisoners, some in trembling handwriting, others stained with blood. He picked one up, opened it, and read in silence. No one knows exactly what was written in that letter, but something in the general's eyes changed. It was the transition from witness to accuser, from commander to historian. It was there that he decided what he would do in the weeks ahead. Eisenhower would visit every concentration camp he could reach, not just Ohrdruf, all of them, personally, without exception. Later, he would explain that nothing, neither formal reports, nor numbers, nor photographs, could ever convey what he had seen, and that for the world to believe, someone with unquestionable authority would have to guarantee the authenticity of the facts. The wind intensified, stirring the torn canvas of a nearby barracks. The scene seemed to call to Eisenhower as if it were alive. He entered, only accompanied by a few officers. The darkness was nearly total, the stench even worse. The floor was covered with old straw, excrement, dried blood. One corner of the room bore dark stains, remnants of impossible attempts to cleaning. A surviving prisoner, hunched and leaning against the wall, lifted his eyes. He smiled when he saw Eisenhower, but it was a broken smile, defeated, almost mechanical. The general stepped forward, removing his own coat and placing it over the man's shoulders. The survivor tried to thank him, but Eisenhower placed a finger to his lips, asking for silence. Then he held the man's hand firmly, a simple gesture, heavy with meaning. When he exited the barracks, his officers waited, expecting orders. He spoke only 3 sentences. "I want a complete record of this. I want German civilians brought here to see it. The world must never be able to say it did not know." Thus began General Eisenhower's parallel mission, not only to defeat the Reich militarily, but to defeat the lie forever. The jeep pulled away down the muddy road as the camp receded behind them, a permanent symbol of what human beings are capable of when blind obedience becomes a religion. Eisenhower looked one last time at the guard towers, then closed his eyes, absorbing every image, because he knew that when the war ended, he would be called upon to explain to the world why the most powerful army on earth had uncovered horrors that defied language. And he would answer, "Because I was there, I saw it." On the road back, no one in the vehicle spoke a word. There was no language left, only the distant sound of American engines advancing through Germany, the symbol of a war not yet finished and of a truth that could never be hidden again.
The convoy moved slowly along a cratered road, the tires kicking up clouds of fine dust that hung in the air like toxic fog. Eisenhower sat in silence in the front seat, which was usually unusual. Normally, he talked, assessed, questioned, but now there was something different in his gaze. His hardened face still showed the same discipline as always, yet beneath that surface lay an inner struggle no one there had ever witnessed, perhaps not even he himself. Major William Koenig, seated beside him, watched the general out of the corner of his eye. He had served with Eisenhower for nearly 3 years. He knew when his commander was processing strategic data, when he was calculating risks. But this was something else. The major noticed that Eisenhower had not taken a deep breath in several minutes, as if he were holding inside himself everything he had seen at Ohrdruf, afraid that if he inhaled fully, the memories might escape or distort. "General?" Koenig asked, breaking the silence. Eisenhower turned slowly, as if returning from a distant place. "I want to go to Buchenwald," he said. His tone left no room for debate. "But sir, reports indicate the camp is still being secured. The 6th Armored Division is clearing the area." It doesn't matter. As soon as it's safe enough, we leave immediately. Koenig swallowed hard. He knew what Buchenwald meant. Everyone did. Preliminary reports spoke of thousands dead, macabre laboratories, improvised torture chambers. But there was something even more disturbing. According to rumors, the Nazis had attempted to evacuate the camp before the Americans arrived, executing prisoners in the courtyards, burning documents, destroying evidence. That was exactly why Eisenhower wanted to go. He feared the world would claim exaggeration, that it would be dismissed as propaganda, that theories would emerge accusing the Allies of fabrication. He knew human history. He understood that the most unbearable truths are always the first to be challenged. The jeep pressed forward, passing through German villages where civilians stood motionless, watching the American advance. Some hid behind windows, others simply stared, their faces tense, guilty, or distant. Eisenhower had ordered that after his visits to the camps, civilians would be forced to enter and see everything with their own eyes. It was the only way to break the collective silence that had hovered over those towns for years, towns so close to atrocities they pretended not to know. Nearly an hour later, the convoy stopped near a forward post. A lieutenant ran toward the vehicle. "General Eisenhower, sir, the sector commander requests your presence. We've found more structures and more survivors." Eisenhower stepped out immediately. The smell of smoke mixed with the odor he already recognized, an odor that, as he would later write, was indescribable yet unforgettable, lingered over the area. They were led to an improvised storage building. On the ground, covered with thin blankets, lay rows of men and children so emaciated they appeared like human shadows. Most lacked the strength to lift their heads. When Eisenhower entered, several of them tried. One raised his hand, as if the presence of the general proved that the war was truly ending. Eisenhower walked among them in absolute silence, kneeling again and again, holding hands as fragile as glass, speaking words they might not understand but could feel. "You are safe now," he whispered to one of them. "You will not be forgotten." An American doctor approached. "General, most of them are dying of starvation. We're trying controlled feeding, but many won't survive." Eisenhower closed his eyes for a moment. Then he lifted his head like a man who had reached an irreversible decision. "I want witnesses, I want photographers, I want film crews. I want high-ranking German officers brought here by force to see this. All of it will be recorded, preserved, and reported to the entire world." As he spoke, his tone was firm, but there was something more. A mixture of indignation and an almost visceral need for historical justice. "Sir," the doctor said hesitantly, "some of our men don't want to come back here. They're traumatized. Many became physically ill after the last visit." Eisenhower nodded. He understood. "I can't force them, but I can ask for volunteers, and I can promise them that what they're seeing will prevent the world from denying what the Nazis did." They continued walking, passing barracks infested with lice, sheds containing surgical instruments still stained with dried blood, and furnaces where documents had been hastily burned. But some papers survived. Sonderbehandlung, special treatment. He knew exactly what that word meant, and in that instant his face changed again, not just indignation, but a quiet, almost paternal fury, as if he had temporarily become responsible for every life destroyed in that place. When they finally reached the main gate, a group of soldiers from the 6th Armored Division stood waiting. The sergeant in charge stepped forward. "Sir, we had to separate several German civilians who came to see the camp. Some became ill. Others said they didn't know anything." Eisenhower extended his hand toward the soldier. "Bring them back, all of them. Bring mayors, clergy, local authorities as well. I want everyone here tomorrow. I will accept no excuses." "Yes, sir." The general turned to Koenig.
If the civilized world can deny this, it can deny anything, and if it denies it, then this war will have been meaningless. They walked side by side toward the vehicle. The sky was growing overcast, bringing with it a cold that seemed to foreshadow the moral shadows that would linger over Europe for decades. "Sir," Koenig asked, "why insist on visiting them all? Isn't one enough?" Eisenhower stopped. He looked directly at him and made sure he was listening. "One day, someone will say these photographs were manipulated, that these horrors were exaggerated, that the Allies invented all of this. And what will you do when that day comes?" "I will be there, Major. I saw it, I touched it, I smelled it. There is no argument against that." Koenig swallowed hard. This was no longer military logic. It was a personal mission of historical truth. The jeep started again, now heading toward Buchenwald, where even greater horrors awaited. And Eisenhower knew each camp added another layer of truth, another necessary proof, another preemptive strike against future lies. The war was not yet over, but the fight for memory, that, he understood, had just begun. Before moving on, Eisenhower turned to his officers, and his voice, though weary, carried purpose. "The world needs to see this, and every person who hears our story must pass it on. If they forget, anything can happen again." Just as he called for witnesses, I now invite you, who are following this narrative, to strengthen this work. Subscribe and comment so that stories like this do not disappear.
The convoy moved toward Buchenwald, and the German landscape grew increasingly grim as the road slowly climbed through the Ettersberg forest. Tall trees cast long shadows that intertwined like hands trying to hide something, but nothing could conceal what awaited at the top of that hill. The soldiers guiding Eisenhower knew it. Some kept their eyes fixed on the ground, as if looking away might change reality. When they finally reached the gates of Buchenwald, silence fell like a curtain of lead. The stone entrance, with its metal sign, still bore traces of soot from clumsy attempts to destroy evidence. The gate creaked as it opened, and Eisenhower stepped forward, feeling the gravel crack beneath his boots. If Ohrdruf had shocked him, Buchenwald would devastate him. Before him stretched a camp so vast and so meticulously organized in its cruelty that it felt industrial, as if death itself had been turned into an administrative process. Barracks aligned with millimetric precision, guard towers placed at exact intervals, pathways forming a labyrinth where every turn concealed something. It was a place that revealed not just evil, but deliberate planning. The general approached the first building, a wooden storage structure. The soldier accompanying him hesitated before speaking. "Sir, what's inside is worse than anything we saw at Ohrdruf." Eisenhower did not hesitate. He pushed the door open, and suddenly darkness returned in details. Shelves, long, tall, ordered as if meant to store valuables. But they were not objects. They were human skin. Eisenhower stepped closer, staring without blinking. An intelligence officer murmured, "We believe they were used for experiments. Some say they were made into book covers." His voice failed him. On another shelf, a set of lamps whose translucent surfaces revealed patterns that were unmistakably unnatural. Eisenhower slowly reached out, then withdrew his hand when he felt the cold glass. "Is this real?" he asked, not because he doubted, but because he needed confirmation. "Yes, sir," the officer replied. "We verified it multiple times." And then, behind an improvised curtain, they found something even worse.
surgical instruments, saws, chemical containers, and an operating table stained with dark brown marks. There, Nazi doctors turned prisoners into living test subjects. Eisenhower stepped back once, but his expression was not revulsion. It was absolute determination. I want detailed footage of this. Every shelf, every object, every instrument, close up. The camera operators nodded, swallowing their own nausea. Then they moved on to the prisoner barracks. The general entered the first one and stopped at the threshold because the smell, an impossible mixture of disease, sweat, death, and survival, struck him like a physical blow. Inside, surviving prisoners struggled to rise when they saw him. Some raised their arms, others simply stared, their eyes enormous in angular skulls. An elderly man staggered forward, holding an empty bowl. Eisenhower knelt before him as he had before. "We are here now. What you endured, the world will know." The man touched the general's face with a weak hand. "Please," he whispered in German, "do not let this be forgotten." Eisenhower nodded slowly, a silent promise that would follow him for the rest of his life. As they continued the visit, he saw the human zoo, a cage where prisoners had been displayed and tortured. He saw the yard where mass executions had taken place just hours before liberation. He saw piles of children's clothing near a crematorium still warm. He saw boxes of ashes. He saw bones. It was an inventory of barbarism. And as he had done in Ohrdruf, Eisenhower ordered German civilians to be brought by force to see everything. Elderly men, women, public officials, teachers, priests. The mayor of Weimar was pushed into the camp by AC soldiers. Several people collapsed on seeing the bodies. Some wept, others tried to turn away. But Eisenhower was there, watching. "Look," his voice echoed with severity. "You lived beside this. You breathed the same smoke." No one answered. At the end of the visit, when he finally returned to the jeep, photographers asked whether he wanted to record a statement. Eisenhower shook his head. "Not today. Not yet. But write this." He dictated slowly. "I have visited every concentration camp I can reach. I want to be present and to record the evidence so that in the future no one can say this was propaganda." The soldier wrote the words exactly as spoken. Then the general took a deep breath and added, "Bring more witnesses, generals, senators, journalists. Show everything. Show the entire truth." On the return trip, as they followed the winding road down the hill, Koenig finally asked, "Sir, what you saw today, does it change our mission?" Eisenhower closed his eyes. The images, the smell, the sounds, all of it blended into a sensory storm he would never forget. "Yes, Major. It changes everything." He opened his eyes. "We are no longer just liberating Europe. We are liberating the truth. This must be documented with such force that not even 1,000 years can erase it." As the jeep disappeared among the trees, the Buchenwald camp remained behind, a permanent scar on the world. But now there was a difference. Eisenhower had seen it, and because of that, the world would have to see it too.
The wind blew colder as Eisenhower left Buchenwald. The sky, once merely overcast, now seemed to press down on Germany like a gray blanket, heavy with everything that had been revealed before him. But the journey was not over. There was still Dachau, Nordhausen, Mittelbau-Dora, Bergen-Belsen,
a growing list of places where human suffering had been transformed into structure, procedure, and routine. Other generals would have delegated the visits. He did not. The jeep moved along the cratered road, and for the first time in hours, no one spoke. The engines were the only constant sound, a low, mournful rumble. Major Koenig, seated beside the general, watched the landscape pass as if it carried invisible stains of everything they had witnessed. After a few minutes, Eisenhower broke the silence. "Major, bring me a typewriter when we reach the command post." Koenig turned. "Yes, sir. For official reports?" "No, for letters. I need to write to the General Staff, to the War Department, and to General Marshall." The major simply nodded. He knew those letters would be historic, and they would be unforgiving. The jeep slowed as it crossed a bridge partially destroyed during the German retreat. American soldiers, covered in mud up to their knees, worked to reinforce the improvised structure. Seeing the general approach, a sergeant raised his arm in salute. "Sir, reports indicate additional survivors found in the woods around Buchenwald, wandering, disoriented." Eisenhower closed his eyes for a second. "Send search teams and bring doctors. None of them should die alone now, not after all this." The sergeant ran to pass along the order. The road stretched on, winding through burned trees and devastated villages. Koenig noticed that the general kept his eyes fixed ahead, but his face carried something new, a mixture of sorrow and urgency, as if he knew time itself was now his enemy just as much as any army. Time would erase memories, distort facts, make room for lies. That was why he had to move fast. Nearly 2 hours later, they reached the forward headquarters of the 12th Army Group. Officers quickly gathered around, bringing maps, reports, requests for deployment. But Eisenhower raised his hand. "Before anything else, bring me a typewriter." Minutes later, he was seated at an improvised desk, a barn door pulled from its hinges and propped up on bricks. The typewriter was placed in front of him, fitted with a fresh ribbon. Eisenhower took a deep breath, aligned the paper, and began typing with precise, forceful, almost aggressive keystrokes. The keys struck like hammer blows. "I recently visited a concentration camp near Gotha. The things I saw there surpass the capacity of the human mind to comprehend. There are no words to describe them." The keys struck like hammer blows. "I tried, but failed to maintain my composure. I felt physically ill." Koenig watched in absolute silence. "I ordered the inhabitants of Gotha to be taken to the camp to see it with their own eyes. I am preparing the same operation in Weilar." The metallic sound of the machine was relentless. Each sentence was a direct strike against future denial. Each word was a moral document. "I request that all available units, generals, journalists, congressmen, come to witness this while the evidence can still be preserved." He paused for a long moment. The filled page trembled slightly beneath his fingers. Then he typed the sentence that would become one of the most important of his career. "The world must never forget. The world must never doubt." When he finished, Eisenhower removed the sheet, folded it carefully into an envelope, and sealed it firmly. Then he looked up and fixed his gaze on Koenig. "Major, prepare the team. We will visit every camp, one by one. I want everything recorded. We will leave no room for misinterpretation." Koenig nodded. "Yes, sir. But why? You've already seen enough to know the truth. You don't need to expose yourself like this. You could delegate these inspections." Eisenhower placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. If I delegate, they'll say I didn't see it personally. If I send photographs, they'll say they were staged. If only soldiers testify, they'll say they exaggerated. And when the world tries to deny it, Koenig answered softly. Eisenhower answered without hesitation. Then they'll say I was there. That night, before sleeping, Eisenhower mentally revisited every face he had seen at Buchenwald. The empty eyes, the emaciated bodies, the trembling hands trying to give thanks. He knew history does not preserve memory on its own. History, without living witnesses, becomes malleable, vulnerable, manipulatable. And he would not allow that. Dawn arrived with new orders. Eisenhower decided that every Allied general in Europe would be required to visit at least one camp. He ordered that complete film records be archived in 3 separate locations so no evidence could ever be destroyed. He ordered that surviving prisoners give testimony immediately before exhaustion or illness could silence them. And he decided something even more important. From today on, this war is no longer only against the Reich, it is against forgetting. In the weeks that followed, Eisenhower visited more camps. In each one, he left something of himself behind, perhaps a fragment of his soul, but carried with him an indignation that became moral fuel. At the last camp he visited, walking among hundreds of bodies stacked in shallow trenches, he murmured to himself and to history, "If I had not seen this, if I had not been here, no one would believe it." Those words echoed in the minds of his men as the war drew to a close. They understood they were fighting for something far greater than territory. They were fighting for memory, for truth, for human dignity. Eisenhower knew the future of humanity depended on it. As he left each liberated camp behind, Eisenhower understood something few in the world yet grasped. The enemies were no longer only German soldiers. They were the lies that would come later, future deniers, revisionists, false historians. He was now fighting against forgetting. And that is why this video exists, because his mission continues, because the truth must be protected, always. If this story moved you, subscribe and comment and help spread this work. Memory now depends on us, just as it depended on him that day.